There's a voice in your head. You know the one that whispers you're not good enough, you're not ready. What if you fail? That voice is loud, persistent, and relentless. But here's the truth that's also a liar. Self-doubt isn't proof of inadequacy. It's proof that you're human. We all have it. Every single one of us. But the difference between those who move forward and those who stay stuck, it's not talent. It's not luck. It's not even confidence. There's a moment before you step into something new, right before you raise your hand, before you speak up, before you take that first terrifying step, when the voice shows up. You know the one? It whispers in the back of your mind, low but sharp, weaving a story you didn't ask for. You're not good enough. You don't belong here? What if they find out you're a fraud? That voice isn't new. It's been there for years, maybe for as long as you can remember. It disguises itself as logic, as realism, as self-protection. But make no mistake, it's a lie. A well-rehearsed, deeply ingrained lie we've learned to tell ourselves over and over again until it feels like truth. The mind is powerful. It gathers evidence to support whatever we believe. So when self-doubt creeps in, the mind scans through past failures, past criticisms, past moments of rejection, and presents them as proof. See, here's why you're not enough. It conveniently forgets the victories, the resilience, the moments you pushed through fear and did the hard thing anyway. It cherry picks your worst moments and plays them on repeat until they define you. And where do these lies come from? Maybe it was a teacher who made you feel small. Maybe it was a parent who, despite loving you, held you to impossible standards. Maybe it was society whispering that you have to be thinner, smarter, richer, or more accomplished to be worthy. Somewhere along the way, we internalize the idea that our worth is conditional, that we have to earn it, that it's tied to achievements, productivity, and other people's approval. So we hustle. We overwork, we perfect. We chase an impossible version of ourselves, believing that once we get there, wherever there is will finally be enough. But here's the trap: there doesn't exist. Because every time you reach a new milestone, the voice moves the goalpost. Okay, you got the job, but you still don't know what you're doing. Okay, they said they love you, but what if they change their mind? Okay, you succeeded this time, but what about next time? It never stops. It never lets you rest. And the most dangerous thing about these lies is that we don't just hear them, we start to believe them. We shrink ourselves. We don't apply for the job. We stay silent in the meeting. We don't go after the things we deeply want, because deep down we don't believe we deserve them. Fear and self-doubt are sneaky. They don't just say you can't, they say you shouldn't. They convince us that playing small is responsible, that staying safe is the right thing to do. And so we sit on our potential, watching others step into the things we dream about, telling ourselves they must have something we don't. More talent, more confidence, more worth. But here's what we forget: they feel it too. The people we admire, they also hear the voice. They also wrestle with doubt. The difference: they don't let it make their decisions for them. They see self-doubt for what it is: a story, not a fact. A habit, not a truth. And the most powerful thing you can do is challenge it. To pause when the voice shows up and ask, is this real or is this just fear talking? To gather evidence of your strength instead of your shortcomings. To remind yourself that your worth isn't up for debate. It isn't something you have to earn. It isn't measured by how much you achieve or how many people approve of you. It just is. We are wired for comfort. It's human nature. We seek out the familiar, the predictable, the safe. It's why we sit in the same spot in meetings. Why we order the same meal at a restaurant. Why we hesitate before stepping into something new. Comfort is easy. It's warm. It requires nothing from us but to stay exactly as we are. But growth lies in discomfort. It demands that we stretch, that we risk, that we step outside the carefully drawn lines of who we think we are. It asks us to show up before we feel ready, to speak before we're certain, to take action before the fear disappears, because it never fully does. We tell ourselves we'll be brave once we feel confident, once we're sure, once we know we won't fail. But that moment never comes. Confidence isn't the starting point. It's the result of showing up again and again, despite the fear. Courage isn't comfortable. It never has been. It's vulnerable. It's messy. It's standing on the edge of uncertainty and taking the leap anyway. Think about the times in your life when you felt the most alive, the moments that shaped you. Did they happen in comfort, or did they happen in discomfort? Were they born from routine, from predictability? Or did they come from stepping into the unknown, from saying yes when it would have been easier to say no, from taking the risk when you weren't sure how it would end? We avoid discomfort because it feels like danger. Our brains are wired that way. Fear isn't just an emotion, it's a survival mechanism. It tells us, stay where it's safe. Don't risk embarrassment. Don't risk failure. Don't risk rejection. But fear doesn't know the difference between real danger and imagined danger. It treats a tough conversation the same way it would treat a life-threatening situation. It convinces us that playing small is the right choice, that silence is safer than speaking up, that staying in a situation that no longer serves us is better than the unknown. And so we stay. We stay in jobs that drain us. We stay in relationships that limit us. We stay in patterns that keep us stuck, not because we're happy, but because we're comfortable. Because stepping into the unknown, even when we know it could be better, still feels terrifying. But here's the truth: comfort and growth cannot coexist. If you want to evolve, if you want to step into your potential, if you want to become the person you're meant to be, you have to be willing to get uncomfortable. It means having the hard conversations, even when your voice shakes. It means showing up for yourself, even when others don't understand. It means risking failure, not because you want to fail, but because not trying at all is the only real failure. It means choosing courage over comfort over and over again. And that choice, it won't be easy. It will stretch you. It will challenge every excuse, every fear, every reason you've ever told yourself for why you can't. But it will also set you free. It will remind you that you are capable of more than you ever imagined. That you are stronger than the fear that holds you back. That the life you want, the one that excites you, the one that scares you in the best way possible, doesn't live in comfort. It lives in courage. The most important stories we tell aren't the ones we share with the world. They're the ones we repeat to ourselves over and over again in quiet moments, in times of doubt, in the spaces where no one else can hear. These stories shape us. They dictate how we see ourselves, how we show up, how we navigate fear, failure, and success. And for many of us, these stories weren't written by us. They were handed to us by childhood experiences, by well-meaning parents, by teachers, by society. Somewhere along the way, we absorbed the belief that we weren't enough, that we had to prove our worth, that failure meant we weren't capable, that mistakes defined us. And so we live inside these narratives, accepting them as truth. I'm not smart enough to do that. I always mess things up. I'm too much. I'm not enough. We say these things without questioning them, without asking where they came from, without realizing that they are just that, stories, not facts. But here's the thing about stories: they can be rewritten. Think about a time when you told yourself you couldn't do something. Maybe it was going after a new job, speaking up in a meeting, setting a boundary in a relationship. That voice, the one that whispered, "You'll fail," or "You don't belong," where did it come from? Did it come from a single moment? A past mistake? Someone else's criticism? And what if that story was never true to begin with? Our inner dialogue is powerful. It determines whether we shrink or expand, whether we pursue opportunities or let them pass by. And if we're not careful, we can spend a lifetime living by a script we never chose, believing lies we never questioned. So how do we change it? First, we have to become aware of it. Most of us don't even recognize how cruel we are to ourselves. We would never speak to a friend the way we speak to ourselves in moments of doubt. We would never look at someone else's mistakes and tell them, "This defines you." Yet we do it to ourselves without hesitation. It's time to interrupt that pattern. The next time that inner critic shows up, pause. Ask yourself, would I say this to someone I love? If the answer is no, then it has no place in your self-talk. Second, we have to replace the narrative. The brain doesn't just erase old beliefs, it replaces them. So instead of "I always fail," try "I learn from every setback." Instead of "I'm not good enough," try "I'm growing and I am worthy as I am." At first, these new beliefs may feel forced, unnatural. That's okay. That's just your old conditioning resisting change. Keep going. Third, we have to gather new evidence. Our minds love confirmation bias. They seek out proof of what we already believe. If we think we're not capable, we'll notice every mistake. If we think we're unworthy, we'll focus on every perceived rejection. But when we shift our beliefs, our brains start to look for new proof. Suddenly, we remember the times we succeeded, the moments we showed courage, the times we were loved for who we are, not just for what we achieved. And finally, we have to practice self-compassion. Rewriting your inner narrative isn't about perfection. It's about progress. You will still have moments of doubt. The old stories will still try to creep in. But the difference is, now you know they are just stories. Now you have the power to choose a different one. We wait for the right moment. We tell ourselves we'll start when we're ready, when we feel more confident, more qualified, more certain. But the truth is, readiness is a myth. Confidence doesn't come before action. It comes because of action. Showing up is the hardest part. Not because we don't want to, but because it requires us to face uncertainty, to risk failure, to step into spaces where we might not feel fully prepared. But what if preparation isn't what matters most? What if the willingness to show up exactly as we are, imperfections and all, is the real key to growth? We look at successful people and assume they had it figured out before they started. But if you listen closely to their stories, you'll hear the same thing over and over. They didn't feel ready either. They doubted themselves. They faced rejection. They wrestled with fear. The difference. They showed up anyway. There's a voice inside that says, you're not good enough yet. You don't belong here. But that voice doesn't get to decide your future, your actions do. Every time you show up despite the fear, you weaken that voice. You prove to yourself that you are capable, that you can handle uncertainty, that you can grow through discomfort. Think about the times in your life when you stepped up, even when you didn't feel ready. Maybe it was speaking in a meeting when your heart was racing. Maybe it was applying for a job you weren't sure you weren't shum. Maybe it was choosing to be vulnerable in a relationship, even when there was a risk of rejection. Those moments weren't comfortable, but they were powerful. They shaped you. The mistake we make is believing that we need confidence first, that we need to eliminate fear before we take action. But confidence is a byproduct of doing the hard thing. It doesn't come from thinking about it, analyzing it, or waiting until we feel braver. It comes from stepping forward even with shaky hands, even with a pounding heart. Showing up is a skill, and like any skill, it strengthens with practice. The more you do it, the more natural it becomes. The more you push through discomfort, the more you realize that fear doesn't control you, control it. But showing up isn't just about big, bold moves. It's about consistency. It's about the small choices we make every day. It's about showing up for yourself in the moments that no one else sees, the early mornings when you work toward your goals, the times you push through doubt to keep going, the moments when you choose self-belief over self-sabotage. It's also about showing up for others, being present, being reliable, being the kind of person who follows through not just when it's convenient, but when it matters. Because in a world full of distractions, full of half-hearted commitments, full of people waiting for the right time, the ones who show up stand out. They build trust. They create momentum. They change their lives not because they never felt fear, but because they refuse to let fear make their choices for them. You don't have to be perfect. You don't have to have all the answers. You don't have to be the most talented, the most experienced, or the most confident. You just have to show up. And then show up again. And again. Because every time you do, you are proving to yourself that you are capable of more than you ever imagined. Somewhere along the way, we learned that our worth is something we have to earn. That it's tied to how much we achieve, how well we perform, how many people approve of us. And so we spend our lives proving ourselves, chasing success, chasing validation, chasing the ever-moving finish line that tells us, now, you're enough, but that finish line, it never stays in one place. You get the degree, but then you need the next title. You hit the goal, but then you need a bigger one. You earn their approval, but then you need to keep it. It's exhausting. Because when your worth is tied to external things that can shift, be taken away, or change, you are never standing on solid ground. You're constantly trying to prove something that was never in question to begin with. Your worth is not a promotion. It's not a relationship status. It's not the number in your bank account. It's not whether everyone likes you. Your worth just is. But we don't believe that, do we? We've been conditioned to think that we have to be more productive, more successful, more likable to justify taking up space. And when we fall short, Because we're human and we will fall short, we convince ourselves that we are less valuable, less deserving, less enough. That belief, I'll be worthy when, is the biggest lie we tell ourselves. And the longer we believe it, the longer we put off truly living. So how do we shift it? First, we have to recognize where it started. Maybe it was a childhood experience that made you feel like love had to be earned. Maybe it was a society that told you your value was in your productivity. Maybe it was years of measuring yourself against impossible standards. Whatever it was, it planted a seed that grew into self-doubt. But just because you learned something doesn't mean you can't unlearn it. Next, we have to separate self-worth from self-improvement. Growth is beautiful. Ambition is powerful. But they are not prerequisites for worthiness. You can strive for more while knowing you are already enough. Owning your worth doesn't mean settling. It means no longer using external achievements as proof that you deserve to exist. Then we have to set boundaries. When we don't own our worth, we over-explain, we over-apologize. We bend ourselves into versions that fit what others expect. We allow people to treat us in ways that don't align with our value. Owning your worth means knowing when to say no. It means walking away from places that don't honor you. It means no longer accepting less than you deserve. And finally, we have to practice self-compassion. Because even as you unlearn the old narratives, there will be days when doubt creeps in. When the old voices whisper, "Are you sure you're enough?" When you feel the pull to measure yourself against someone else's highlight reel. Those moments aren't proof that you're failing, they're proof that you're rewiring something deep. And that takes time. Owning your worth isn't about arrogance. It's not about proving anything to anyone. It's about standing in who you are without apology. It's about knowing that you don't have to be perfect to be valuable, that you don't have to earn the right to take up space. That right was yours the moment you were born. Fear has one job: to keep you safe. It's been with you since the beginning, hardwired into your brain, designed to protect you from danger. But here's the problem: fear doesn't know the difference between real danger and imagined danger. It treats stepping onto a stage the same way it treats stepping into a lion's den. It doesn't distinguish between physical threats and emotional risks. It just says stop. Stay where it's safe. Don't take the risk. And for most of us, we listen. We assume fear is a warning sign, a flashing red light telling us to turn back. But what if fear isn't always a barrier? What if, instead of stopping us, it's actually pointing us in the right direction? Think about the things that scare you, not the irrational fears, but the ones tied to your dreams, your growth, your potential. The fear of failing, the fear of being seen, the fear of stepping into something new. If you dig deeper, you'll realize that fear tends to show up most when something truly matters to you. It doesn't mean don't do it. It means this is important. We're taught to see fear as an enemy, something to conquer, to eliminate, to push away. But fear isn't the enemy, it's information. It's telling you that you're on the edge of something meaningful, that you're about to step into unknown territory, that you're growing. The people who do big things, the ones who inspire us, the ones who create, lead, and innovate, they don't operate without fear. They feel it. But instead of letting it paralyze them, they use it as a compass. They recognize that if something scares them, it probably means they should be doing it. But using fear as a guide requires a mindset shift. It means no longer interpreting discomfort as a sign to retreat. It means recognizing that fear is part of the process, that waiting for fear to disappear before you take action means you'll be waiting forever. Fear is not a roadblock, it's an invitation. An invitation to step forward even with shaky hands. An invitation to trust yourself, even when uncertainty looms. An invitation to prove to yourself that you are more capable than you ever imagined. The next time fear shows up, instead of asking, how do I get rid of this? Ask, what is this telling me? If you're afraid of failing, maybe it means you care deeply about succeeding. If you're afraid of speaking up, maybe it means your voice is worth hearing. If you're afraid of taking a leap, maybe it means you're standing at the edge of something life-changing. Fear doesn't mean stop. It means pay attention. It means lean in. It means you're on the brink of something that could change you. And when you learn to work with fear instead of against it, you stop seeing it as a barrier. You start seeing it for what it truly is: a signal that you are stepping into something bigger than yourself.